Well, it's a pretty day here in the Cataloochee Valley, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on this 24th of August, 2021. Up visiting from Southwest Florida. Love to come back here. My family lived here back in the day, and like a lot of other families, had to move out when the Park Service took over. And well, the good part about that is that the land is preserved and we can come back and enjoy it, at least in a much different state than they knew it. It was anything but quiet on this spot on 26th of June, 1864. This was the old Cataloochee Turnpike. I'm actually standing on the old roadbed. Now, the current road is just behind me. The surface of the road is about even with the top of my hat in this picture. And so the roadbed, the original Cataloochee Turnpike, is abandoned in places, even though the current state road route follows basically the same route. But my point is, I'm standing on what was the Cataloochee Turnpike in 1864 when Union soldiers came through Mount Sterling Gap, came up this road to the young Bennett house, which stood at this location. Young Bennett had been one of the early settlers in the Cataloochee Valley and had built here. And on that Sunday afternoon, he had visitors. Levi Caldwell and much of his family were here visiting when they were surprised by these Union raiders. Those Union men, of course, were looking for livestock or anything they could pilfer, or otherwise just looking to disrupt as much as they could in this part of the country as they were waging war during that terrible conflagration. It's said that Bennett's wife objected, protested, even struck one of the soldiers. Maybe it was because of that, or maybe it was because, as Mark Hanna said, that young Bennett was said to be an uncompromising Confederate, that they eventually burned his house to the ground. So the spot where I'm sitting was a big conflagration then with a big fire as that house was burned. And then the soldiers tried to capture the men, young Bennett and Levi and their sons. And they made a concerted effort to do that. Now, some of this was told to me by Papaw Jarvis Caldwell. He wasn't really my grandfather. He was the grandfather of my first cousins, the father of my Uncle Harley Caldwell, and I used to mow his yard for him and Mamaw Bonnie Caldwell up on Allen's Creek when I was a boy. And sitting out on the porch, he would tell me Cataloochee stories, and this was one of them. His father, who in later life was known as Big George Caldwell, was about 7 or 8 years old when the raid happened, and Papaw said his daddy told him that he could remember standing up and seeing those soldiers grabbing those boys and throwing them on the horses behind them and yelling, "Get!" Well, that's the way he recalled it. Levi and at least his son Hiram bailed off down through these woods, straight down in front of me, all the way down to the Cataloochee Creek, which came out about in front of where the group campground is now, the old Will Hall place, my uncle. And they were trying to get away, but they were no match for the cavalrymen who chased in behind them and caught them. Now, Hiram eventually got away. Levi did not, at least initially. He was carried off over to Tennessee. He did finally get loose there and made his way back here to the valley, but by the time he got here, he had suffered so much deprivation and was in such bad health, and his family thinks he probably had a collapsed lung, that by the time he got home, he was in pitiful shape and was bedridden until the day he died about a month later in early November of 1864, and he is buried on the hillside opposite Palmer Chapel Methodist Church. And his wife was left a widow to raise a family, and she eventually married one of the other settlers, Jonathan Woody, who already had a family and was a widower himself. And those families combined together. That's another story. Levi's son, Andy Caldwell, was captured also, and he was forced to water the horses and take care of things. And later in life, he actually received a federal pension for his service in the Union Army. That didn't sit too well with his family, especially with his brother Harrison, who had been in the Confederate Army during the war. And Uncle Harrison wouldn't speak to Uncle Andy after that. Well, at least they didn't shoot at each other. In a way, they let bygones be bygones. There was enough gospel preaching and Bible teaching here in the valley that people didn't take up arms against each other over their political differences. And there were a number of Union veterans who lived here in in the valley, including my own great-great-great-grandfather, John Wesley Hall. And again, that's another story. They pulled pranks on poor Andy Caldwell, but I won't go into that. Just trying to tell you that here on this old Cataloochee Turnpike, on a Sunday afternoon in June 1864, it was not a quiet day, and people suffered as a war was going on. And I'm telling this not because I'm going to profit off of it in any way. People have said I ought to write a book. I just don't feel right about making money off of stories that other people have told me. They're not my stories. And I can't even be sure that I'm relaying accurate information. You know, I may have misremembered things. I would never blame my getting things wrong on the people who told things to me. So if I'm telling you a version of events that differs from the version that you heard, I'm not claiming to be right. Your version may be the correct one. I'm just trying to tell you what I've been told and putting it together with what little bit of research I've done. But I thought it would be neat to at least do it here on location, where the young Bennett house once stood on the old Cataloochee Turnpike. A road system that was completed just as the Civil War was starting. And unfortunately, a road system that was built for good purposes ended up being used for nefarious ones. And I'll talk some more about that later. May God bless you.